Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhijñaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejovari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakohakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukad Amritadrava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We now enter the fourth chapter of the 11th Skandha of Bhagavatam. So this continues with the dialogue between the King Nimi and the 9 sages. We have so far seen the responses of 6 sages. Now King Nimi asks a question about the avatars. Having heard about the nature of devotion, the symptoms of devotion, the nature of Maya, how to transcend Maya, the essence of the supreme truth, and the essence of Karma Yoga. These are all the questions he asked. Now he is asking, please narrate to me the various pastimes and the various incarnations or avatars taken by the Supreme Being Sri Hari to bestow grace. So now the next sage who responds is Drumila. So Drumila says, first of all, it's impossible to enumerate the endless qualities or incarnations of the infinite Lord. He says one can even count the number of particles of dust on earth, but it is impossible to count all the pastimes or excellences of the Supreme Lord. So even in the very first Skandha, it is said that that's why the number of avatars are countless. Avataraha asankheyaha, it said the number of avatars are beyond count. So here also he says one cannot count the avatars because they are numberless. Then he first gives the principle. He says when Narayana, the first and foremost supreme deity, he evolved this universe, he brought forth the 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, and soil. And then he, out of these elements, brought forth the universe as his own body, and he entered it as the supreme cosmic being or Purusha. So this is again described even in the very first Skandha, and it is again described here that when the universe is evolved, the Supreme Being brings forth the 5 elements and then 16 principles. The 16 principles are the 5 elements first, then the 5 senses of cognition, 5 senses of action, and then the mind. And then he enters the universe as the inner controller, while assuming the universe as his own body as the cosmic being Purusha. So Drumila also says, therefore he is the Purusha, the cosmic being, the one whose very body is the universe, and it is he who bestows both action and wisdom for all creatures. His nature is pure consciousness, and his very breath is the source of strength for all beings. And he brings forth through Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas creation, sustenance, and dissolution of the universe. Further, he says, through the quality of Rajas, he brings forth Brahma, the creative energy of the universe. Through Sattva, he brings forth Vishnu, the sustaining energy of the universe. And through Tamas, he brings forth Rudra, the dissolving energy of the universe. And thereby, as Brahma, Vishnu, and Rudra, he creates, preserves, and destroys the universe in each epoch. Then he goes on to say that now I will enumerate the various avatars. So first he describes Narayana. So in Bhagavatam, different places the avatars are enumerated. In the first Skandha, Suta Maharishi enumerates. In the second Skandha, Brahma enumerates. And now here we see Drumila enumerate, and each time the order is different, the number is different, because as already mentioned, in reality the number is countless, and therefore each one offers whatever their realization is. So here Drumila first begins with Nara Narayana. He says Nara and Narayana, who are always performing tapas in Badrinath, Badrikashram, are always abiding in the supreme knowledge of the self and constantly preaching it as well as abiding in it, and their feet are worshipped by the rishis even today, and they are called Nara Narayana. And then he gives a particular pastime which has been alluded to before, but it's given in more detail, wherein Indra once sends the deity of attraction, Kamadeva, to Naranarayana to disturb their penance. So Kamadeva did not know the prowess of Narayana, and therefore he came there with a huge bevy of beautiful women, and also he created the spring season and soft breezes. So with all his mystical powers, he created the perfect sort of environment which tempts men. So the season was spring, the trees were blooming, the breeze was soft, the weather was mild, and the women were all beautiful, and they were all looking at him with amorous glances. But Narayana was, of course, unaffected, the sage Narayana, along with Nara. And so he simply smiled and he said, "You all can be here. It's absolutely fine, and you can be our guests." So, seeing how the sage is completely unaffected, Kamadeva was very ashamed, and he spoke in a prayerful way that you are unaffected by all of these women. Of course, it's no surprise because you are beyond the effects of Maya. All the rishis, all the sages, in fact, worship your lotus feet, and even they revel in the pure wisdom of the self. Then, what to speak of you? Anyone who worships you attains the supreme abode, overcoming all the obstacles in their path. So, whatever obstacles that are put forth in their path, they overcome, they get over it because you are their protector. And therefore, he says how whatever might be there, whether it's hunger and thirst, cold, heat, rain, weather changes, temptations of the palate, sexual urge, all of these they overcome because they are all surrendered to you, and therefore it is a folly to even think we can tempt you when even those who surrender unto you are not affected by it. So, in this way, Kamadeva praises him, though he came originally with the intent of disturbing him, recognizing his supreme greatness, he only praises him. Then Narayana, the sage Narayana, produces many beautiful women of his own who are far more beautiful than the women that Kamadeva brought forth. And he says, "Look at all these women, you can take them if you want." So he just smiles and shows how all of these are just appearances, and therefore, being the Lord of all yogas, all Maya, Narayana simply brought forth such beautiful women that even Kamadeva was awestruck. And then he said, "Instead of trying to tempt me with women, now look here, there are women who are far more beautiful, and they are all only appearances that are projected. You can choose anyone out of them and take with them to your heavenly abode." So that is how Urvashi was taken. Urvashi is considered the most beautiful woman who was created by the sage Narayana. So Kamadeva bows down and takes her to Indra, and Indra is astonished. Indra had sent Kamadeva with the intent of disturbing his tapas, but he now recognizes his greatness and also sees the beauty of Urvashi, who was sent by Narayana, and he is greatly astonished. So, this is the story of Narayana along with Nara, who perform penance in Badrinath. After narrating this, Then Drumila goes on to narrate all the other various avatars one by one very beautifully. He says, he appeared as the divine swan, he appeared as Dattatreya, he appeared as the four brothers Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, Sanat Kumara, and he also appeared as our father Rishabha, who taught the knowledge of the Supreme Self. So we must remember that Rishabha, who is the son of Nabhi, we saw, is himself a manifestation of Vasudeva, one of the avatars, and therefore Drumila, who is the son of Rishabha, says our father Rishabha is also an avatar. So are the four brothers. And then he goes on to say Hayagriva is another avatar in which he killed the demon Madhu and recovered the Vedas. Then as the divine fish Matsya, he protected the Manu called Satyavrata during universal dissolution and protected all the species of earth. So this also is a story we saw in the 8th Skandha, where during the universal dissolution, Matsya became this huge fish that guided the boat of Manu with all the species who were protected during the universal dissolution by having them in the waters and then regenerating all the species. Then he says there was the avatar of the divine boar or Varaha who killed Hiranyaksha and removed earth from the depth of the ocean, which is the symbolism of removing the chaos from earth and restoring it back to order. Then he says, as a divine tortoise, which is the Kurma avatar, he supported Mount Mandara on his back when the ocean was churned for nectar. So, this is the story we saw of the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of nectar by the gods and the demons, when Mandara was held on the back of Kurma avatar, tortoise. Then he goes on to narrate Gajendra, the avatar that came to protect Gajendra rather. Gajendra is the king of elephants who was caught in the jaws of the alligator, and when he cried for help, the Lord appeared as Hari to protect him. Then he also came in many ways, once to protect all the rishis who had been affected and grown weak and being subdued by evil forces. He once came to protect Indra. Then he narrates the most auspicious Narasimha avatar, where he came as man-lion to kill Hiranyakashipu to protect Prahalada. This is the glorious avatar we saw in the 7th Skandha, where Hiranyakashipu was completely caught in his ego and even about to kill his own son Prahalad, when Narasimha appeared from a pillar and killed Hiranyakashipu. Then he says he appeared in various manvantaras, that is various epochs, in various avatars. Then he recounts a few more. One is the divine dwarf Vamana, where he appeared to ask for alms from Bali Maharaj. We saw this story in the 8th Skandha as well, where he comes as the dwarf Brahmana Vamana, asks for 3 paces of land, and then takes the giant form of Trivikrama to measure the whole of earth and heaven. And Bali himself surrenders himself and thus attains immortal fame. So this is the story of Vamana avatar that here Drumila narrates. Then he gives the account of Parashurama, the one born of the Bhargava race, to kill the Kshatriyas. Then he gives the most wonderful Ram avatar, that is the spouse of Sita, Sri Rama, who comes to kill the 10-headed demon Ravana and destroy his capital Lanka and be victorious in getting Sita back by building a bridge across the ocean, going to Lanka, killing Ravana, getting her back, and his fame is still sung all the time as Ramayana. Then he says the Lord will appear as the great Krishna along with Balaram in the race of Yadu, and perform deeds which are unthinkable even for the demigods. So, this is the glorious Krishna avatar along with Balaram, which we saw in detail in the 10th Skandha. Then he goes on to complete the future avatars as well. He says the Lord will appear as Buddha, who will bewilder by his arguments those who are blindly attached to sacrificial rites of the Vedas, and thereby he will bring forth a new way. Then he'll appear as Kalki, who will come at the end of the Kali Yuga and destroy all the evil kings. And in this way, he says, there are so many descents of the Lord of the universe of immense glory, and I have narrated to you some of them. So this is another beautiful narration of the various avatars of Narayana. So we see each narration of the avatars is slightly different and each beautiful in its own way. Here we saw more emphasis on Narayana, and then all the avatars that Trumila narrated, the most important avatars, which were all recounted, and thereby the question of Nimi about the avatars of Narayana is answered totally by Drumila. And with this chapter ends. We'll continue in the next chapter with the remaining two sages who will be answering some other questions of King Nimi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.